Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for our C&D webinar this evening. It's a great pleasure to have this important discussion with this fantastic panel and you participants. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A as we go along. So the subject of our session this evening is, what is real security? And this past year has really thrown this question into sharp relief. With the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, our health security has risen to the top of the list. Although a virus may be in sight, we know this is the age of the pandemic and others will be on their way because of bad agribusiness practices and the devastation of natural habitats. So health will continue to be a top security priority. Alongside that comes our need for economic security, the ability to earn a living, to buy food, to find and maintain a home. The climate crisis also threatens our security and the very future of humanity. And nuclear weapons threaten our security with the risk of catastrophic war. C&D has recently launched a new edition of our Security Not Trident report, which touches on all these issues. So do take a look at it. You can find it on the C&D website. And if you want a hard copy, please do get in touch with us. We've got a great panel of speakers this evening, and we really couldn't have better timing for a really interesting debate because the Prime Minister chose today to announce the largest investment in the British military since the end of the Cold War. He's given the MOD an additional £16.5 billion for the next 4 years, and he's framed it as an end to Britain's era of retreat. Amongst other horrors, he is launching a new space command, thus extending saber rattling to outer space. This is the man who has been unable to deal with the pandemic. Surely this money should be going to rebuild a world-class health service and provide social care that is really worthy of the name. Unfortunately, we've seen today that the Labour Party has supported this spending. But I'm sure our speakers will address all these issues and more. They each have 8 minutes to start off with, then we'll go to Q&A. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. Use the chat function to share links and comments, and if speakers have time, they may be able to comment there too. So without further ado, welcome to our first speaker, a great friend of C&D, Richard Norton-Taylor, writer and former Guardian Defence and Security editor. Over to you, Richard. Unmute yourself. Yes.
Hello, thanks very much, and I'm delighted to be here and participate in this. And as you say, it's very something's happened in the middle of my screen. That's better. It's very appropriate, really, that the government must have timed its announcement, talking about real threats, as the government calls it, real threats, cyber, space, and it talks about new weapons and need for more artificial intelligence and drones. And what is conspicuously absent in his announcement, in Boris Johnson's announcements, was with any mention of Trident or nuclear weapons. Is that significant, or is the government too embarrassed to actually mention these unnecessary and useless and very expensive weapons? Just the other day, the National Oil Office, which is one of the few outfits which actually monitor the Ministry of Defence at all effectively, unlike, I'm afraid to say, the Labour opposition and anyone in Parliament except for one or two exceptions. Could I mention the former leader of the Labour Party? I better not, or Caroline Lucas, as Kate has mentioned, and one or two other very few individuals. The Public Accounts Committee, which relies on the National Audit Office reports, talked earlier this week about the amount of money that is being wasted on aircraft carrier program. There's already a 13 billion pound hole in the Ministry of Defence budget. So this 16.5 billion extra, which is mentioned, which is announced today, is going to be swallowed up pretty quickly, because the aircraft carriers also are very the vulnerable tin cans, even though they cost well over £6 billion. And the phrase vulnerable tin cans was a phrase from a former former Chief of Defence Staff, General Richards, to me not so long ago. The carriers are going to cost £18 billion. So that's talking about money. We know that, of course, nuclear weapons are costing at least, well, the government continues to refuse to say how much they're going to cost, but £200 billion at least, and probably more, because poor management and technical problems, genuine technical problems, has meant many delays in the program of new reactors. Rolls-Royce is having problems with those. For the new Dreadnought fleet. Why is the fleet called Dreadnought fleet, by the way? A Dreadnought fleet because it looks to the past. The government will say it's the great sort of patriotic name, the dreadnoughts of the early 19th century, 20th century, I should say, or 19th century too, actually. But Dreadnought is meant to be a sort of great patriotic name. Anyway, there are serious problems with the current nuclear weapons program. For example, the government, well, not only in reactors and the submarines themselves, but also the atomic weapons establishment in Aldermaston, where the government recently said that maybe the idea of actually letting Serco and other companies managing is not really a good idea. Serco, as we know, is managing or trying to manage the test and trace and other pandemic-related subjects, projects. The new warhead program, which the government insists that Britain's nuclear weapons program must have a new warhead system, is based on American system, is meant to be projected to be based on the W993, but which is American designed warhead, it's very far from clear whether the US Congress, even under Trump, was willing to spend money on this go-ahead. So that will mean Britain it will have, by British Ministry of Defence's own description, outdated and therefore very dangerous nuclear warheads. The Mensa program, which was designed to assemble and reassemble warheads, is 6 years late. It reminded me of John Thompson, the former head of the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Defence, who was asked a couple of years ago what kept him awake at night. He said the Trident program. And that is it's not surprising that he says that. The other question is, which people ask, is, or maybe they don't ask, not enough actually, is an independent, the quote independent nuclear program that the British have. Of course, it's not independent at all. It's dependent entirely on the US, not only for technical know-how at Aldermaston and other places, but on the missile systems, as we know. I think even Ministry of Defence senior military officials, as well as honest Whitehall officials and Cabinet Office officials, privately admit that Britain couldn't run its own nuclear weapons system without American help more than for a few months. The government also talks about the greatest sort of defense of nuclear weapons, or one of the greatest defense of nuclear weapons, is it provides the ultimate assurance, the ultimate insurance if something really goes wrong and Britain's really under serious threat. But of course, it has not been, as I think Kate mentioned earlier on, the risk assessments of the Cabinet Office had put nuclear weapons nowhere near the top. In fact, right quite near the bottom, the last national risk registers, as they're called, and pandemics were the very, very top. Of course, the government ignored that and didn't want to spend money, as we now know, through the whole what's coming out of the whole sort of pandemic inquiries, and more information is coming out saying that. So what I wanted to really say is that just all these confirm really that nuclear weapons are completely irrelevant and extremely expensive and extremely dangerous. The chairman of the Commons Defence Committee, in response to the government's announcement today, Tobias Ellwood, who's vaguely saying Ministry of Defense junior minister who was sacked because of his vaguely saneness, I think. He said today, the cash injection that today's will fail to deliver without a coherent and considered strategy. And threats and priorities are yet to be formally identified. And we know also that the integrated, so-called integrated security and defense review, which the government should have published by now, is being postponed until early next year and possibly even longer. And this is Elwood to continue. Although the government is rightly ambitious in its vision for the UK's standing on the world stage, questions remain about how it plans to achieve these ambitions. Now, one of the other is, and it's a serious point, and I was delighted that the Yes Minister programme was repeated on the BBC. The Yes Minister programme, Prime Minister programme, sorry, which was a great hit. It's been repeated when the new Prime Minister Paul Eddington wanted to get rid of Trident, and it's a very humorous and very pointed humorous programme about how the government and civil servants embarrass British government ministers.
You've had 8 minutes now.
Okay, right. And the last point is, of course, it is basically it's a status point. It's a status point, and you get quite serious people in the Ministry of Defence who say, "Look, we can't allow the French to be the only nuclear weapon state in Europe." Okay, I better stop now, but I look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much indeed, Richard. Our next speaker is Dr. Phil Webber. Phil is Chair of Scientists for Global Responsibility. Phil, over to you.
Hello. Yes, you asked me to talk about new threats facing us in the 21st century, and rather disappointingly, I suppose, a lot of the new threats are going to be the same as the threats that were facing us before, because we haven't done much about them. In fact, some of them may worse. So I'll just run through what those are. We're certainly facing accelerating climate heating, possibly even runaway climate heating if we don't do something about it. And that really is a consequence of unrestrained growth of the wrong sort. And we're going to see more floods, more extensive fires, more droughts, and possibly even some more extreme cold snaps, so extreme weather. So we have that to look forward to unless we really do something about climate change. That's a very real and present danger. And you can't help saying that the current money that's been splurged out on very unclear so-called military objectives today is far in excess of money that's been promised to deal with climate heating. As a result, partly of that and of our close involvement and intense farming, we're going to face other pandemics. If we're looking towards this next century, there was an outbreak of a different variant of COVID due to mink farming in Denmark. There's risks from intensive farming of chickens and pigs. And really, that's a real threat, which climate change also makes worse. I think the government spending and the way the nuclear armed states in particular are continuing to spend money on weaponry presages a continuation of an arms race. And this so-called Space Command, which is talking about Scottish security just because they're supposedly able to launch a rocket from Scotland. To do what is my first question. But to suggest that this somehow improves security is a nonsense. What we are involved in is an arms race and spending money on the wrong things, because we're spending on military, we're not spending on, for example, climate change. And we're also continuing to fund weapons of mass destruction. We're seeing growing inequality and poverty, and we're seeing the rise of more nationalism, populism and racism. And I regret to say, unless we deal with and create a more equal society, that will continue. And we'll see more examples of Trumpist type politics. And I can't help but say that I see Boris Johnson as a sort of mini Trump in some respects. We can expect more regional armed conflict because we're fueling it by not stopping our arms sales to, for example, Saudi Arabia and the horrible conflict in Yemen. We continue to sell arms to Israel, where weapons are used in quite an oppressive way. And we continue to develop our weapons of mass destruction, which is the successor program. And really all that guarantees is that our rubble will jump higher after. If we use the weapons first, it doesn't make any sense. If we use the weapons second, it doesn't make any sense. And 122 nations in the world accept and believe that nuclear weapons make everybody less safe. And I think that is the same attitude. And this country ought to understand that and recognize that nuclear weapons don't keep anybody safe. They don't save anybody. And as Richard said, in my view, rightly, they're about a misplaced idea of status. They're another example of UK, British exceptionalism. The only thing we're exceptional for is being very bad at dealing with a whole range of serious issues and actually making another load of very serious issues worse by complicity in invading or destabilizing a whole range of countries around the world. I mean, Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, just to give a few examples. Currently, we're trying to ignore or not supporting the new treaty on the which basically says, according to international law, that nuclear weapons will become illegal on the 22nd of January. Now, that may have an impact in creating a lot of disinvestment from companies who are funding or making components for nuclear weapons. So there is a bit of hope that that will make a difference. So I think, oh yes, autonomous weapons, that's another thing. Again, I can't see for the life of me how that is in anybody's interest. So I'm afraid there's a whole range of very serious issues facing us, and government spending currently is not aligned with those real dangers. And the cuts to foreign aid are really counterproductive in that regard too. So I'm afraid we've got the wrong priorities. I mean, it's shocking, for example, that we're spending far more on the military than we are on climate change, and the government was unable to find money just for meals for kids over the holidays. I mean, these are shocking contrasts. We're a rich country. We can afford and we should afford to use our resources and wealth and our human resources much better. So that's my summary, and I'd like to leave plenty of time for discussion.
Thanks very much, Phil. 1 minute within your limit. Fantastic. Right, and now it's a real pleasure to welcome our third speaker, Diana Francis. Diana is an author and a peace advocate, and she is speaking to us this evening in her capacity as part of the Rethinking Security network, which I'm very pleased to say that C&D is a part of. So, Diana, over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Good to be with you. Richard and Phil have covered well the impact of current military approach to national security. It's so very British and macho and obsessed with power projection and domination. It's not a model of power that's going to help us very much in the current world. The cost in money wasted and destruction done in terms of pollution and extraction and laying waste to countries under bombing and so on is absolutely unimaginable. And yet, in everyday life, if you asked anybody what security meant to them, you would get the sort of answer that Kate was referring to. So, I want a secure income. I need to know that I can keep my home. I need to know I can feed my children, that they will get a decent education. I want to know I'll be looked after when I'm old. I'd like to think I have a future if I'm young. These are things that are very much on people's mind and never more so than at the moment. And yet we waste money on this horrible system of so-called security. And for those reasons, Rethinking Security was formed to try and generate a new conversation, which is about a very different approach to security as a human and planetary need, not as a national need and a national route to glory. It's about shared or common security, and it embraces human rights and democracy, environmental protection, so desperately needed now, about economic and social equality, which have never seemed further away. And it's about peace and cooperation, which are the only route to creating those other forms of security. And our ambition is to have a conversation that's radical enough and transformative enough to begin to push against current power circles thinking and change policy. At the moment, the government think if you weaken on so-called defence, you're a sissy and nobody will vote for you. And I think if ever that was true, it's getting less and less so. And we have to push that conversation along. The integrated security review was about as bad as we'd expected. And Rethinking Security made its own substantial submission, as CND did, and as other members of the Rethinking Security network did. Even we in Bath made quite a substantial submission. But did we expect anything out of it? Anything good? Not really. And we were right not to, because what we've heard so far, I mean, Trident was already written into it. It wasn't even debatable from the start. And what we've heard now is what we terribly feared is that defence now has been, the MOD's been taken out of the equation because they've had their money promised and masses of it. And as we suspected would happen, international developments being squeezed and disregarded, and so has diplomacy. So it's very, very depressing. Anyway, to cast some light and cheer on the subject, Rethinking Security has decided and was thinking about this some months ago to launch an alternative security review. And we really, really hope that we'll get big participation in it. One of the defects of the government's review, one of the many, was that actually it wasn't a democratic process at all, because most people hadn't even heard of it. And submissions, even if you were an organisation of some substance, were most likely to be disregarded. Even parliaments had very little say in it. So the alternative security review will define security in the broadest possible terms as a matter for human beings and the planet, as some countries do to a small extent already, but we can do much better. And we want to gather the voices of as many people as possible. And there'll be an expert level of the review and a nationwide gathering of data. There'll be a mobilization of our networks to engage in the review locally through, for instance, the local groups of any of our member organizations and anyone else who wants to pitch in. And the idea is to go to local populations and ask people through community forums and surveys and interviews and workshops what their ideas are of security, what they think they need to be secure. And we're going to try our best to include the voices of people currently not heard, people without homes, people who've been squeezed out of the social services because poor old local authorities don't have the money to run them, people who have mental health problems, people who are refugees. There are loads of people who are on the outside of care and need care. They know what they need and they know what security would mean. And we also want to have voices of people in local residents associations, for instance, to create a more broad and mixed survey collection. Perhaps going to different religious bodies and trying to get a range of ethnic identities involved. It's going to be very difficult, it's going to be challenging, and it's also a huge opportunity for local engagement, local conversations, and to contribute to something that really could make a difference in the national discourse. There will be then a difficult process of feeding in, combining, drawing on all the data that's gathered, formulating it for presentation to the public, and also creating from it a new vision and strategy for security in the UK and contributing to security in the world. And by the way, we will be hearing from people in other parts of the world who've been on the receiving end of current security policy to see what they have.
You've had 8 minutes now.
Okay, so it's a moment of opportunity and hope, I think, and I hope many of you will want to join.
Thanks very much indeed, Diana. That's very interesting. Just my first question is to you now then. So if people who are listening or watching want to get involved in that, how do they do that?
Go on the Rethinking Security website, look up the contact details and be in touch. And then we have an outreach group which will help to process the grassroots element of the survey.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's an opportunity for everyone to be heard, and I'm sure there are many CND members and groups who will be keen to put their views into that. I mean, I appreciate you're trying to go beyond the converted, but nevertheless, I'm sure we'll want, our members and supporters will want to help voices be heard too from other sources. Okay, thanks very much. So now we're going over to the Q&A. So I've got some that have been submitted in advance, and I've got some that have come in either in the Q&A box or chat. So first of all, I'm going to put 2 questions together to the panel. They both touch on the president-elect, Biden. So I know we're all thrilled that Trump is hopefully on his way out. There are mixed views about what we might expect under Biden, but I've got 2 questions. So I'll put them both to the panel, and then panel, if you could indicate if you would like to come in on all aspects of that. Richard, I haven't asked the questions yet, so you must be pretty eager. Just hold on a second. Obviously, the sound of Biden is like a red rag. Okay, so the first one is from Kenneth Cowan. Kenneth, I believe you're joining us from deep France, I think. Kenneth says, it is certain that the present UK government, or even an eventual Labour government, would not cancel the UK Trident programme. We beg to differ, of course, with that, Kenneth. We're going to make sure that they do cancel it. He says, but just imagine the reaction of the Biden administration in the US if we did. What do you think it would be? So that's the first question. And then also on this kind of theme, this is from Tom Cuthbert. He says, is Boris Johnson's announcement today of arms expenditure confirmation of his status as Britain's Trump rather than a Biden ally for nuclear disarmament? Okay, so those are the two questions I'm putting to you. So Richard, you're going first.
Okay, thank you, Kate. But I don't think he'll change his spots, Boris Johnson. I mean, he won't be Britain's Trump. It's not in his interest now that Biden is there. But I think that Britain will, the British government has always said that, well, it knows very well that it'll ingratiate itself with whoever is US president, whether it's invading Iraq or anything else, whoever, and certainly the Americans. Well, the question is, do the Americans want an independent, viable British nuclear dependent, quote, independent? We know it's not really independent because it's dependent. Do the Americans really want to invest in promoting a more powerful, if I can use that adjective, nuclear weapon? I think they may not, but they probably will. And I think that how do we put pressure on the new American administration? It's going to be very difficult. I suppose you can suggest Biden, who's very close to his own Irish roots, and apparently, of course, Ireland has been prominent in neutrality and certainly and human rights and against and for cutting down weapons programs throughout the world. Maybe I should. Is Scotland relevant in this debate? Maybe not. But Independent Scotland produces very interesting questions for America and as well as Britain. But I'm afraid I don't think that it'll make much difference at all in Britain's attitude, Britain's formal attitude, the government's formal attitude to America, and because and how much it needs America to invest in our in Britain's weapons, nuclear weapons program.
Okay, thanks very much. Phil or Diana, would you like to come in on these? Diana, and then Phil.
I would bow to Richard's knowledge, but my sense is that maybe Biden would be more of he's more interested in multilateral relationships, and therefore, if there were a movement for obeying or fulfilling our NPT obligations and pushing for, working for multilateral disarmament, he just might be a possible person to get on board, whereas Trump never would have been.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil.
My take on Biden, well, I would hope very much he'd want to engage with New START, so have some limitations on nuclear weapons. The other thing is the signs that the Americans are looking to extend the life of current Trident rather than modernize it, because it's actually proving quite difficult. I think there could be more scope for a no first use policy. There's quite a lot of security people arguing the case for doing away with land-based missiles entirely, which I'm sure would create all sorts of ructions. But to be honest, if you think nuclear weapons are a good idea, which I don't, if you've got thousands of them under the sea, there's no point in having them on land as well, and in bombers and all the rest of it. So there's lots of scope for reduction. So I would suggest, I would also think he'd regenerate the Iranian deal about nuclear proliferation as well. So those are positive signs, but I wouldn't go much further than that, except to note that Ireland has signed and is a supporter of the Treaty on the Prevention of Nuclear Weapons, as are in Austria, not that that's relevant to Biden particularly, most of the Pacific, smaller Pacific nations have also supported the treaty. So I think there's some positive signs there. I mean, anything but Trump is an advantage, but I don't think the danger is, in my view, that unless politics change, we create the conditions for more Trump-like people in the future. And that's my real concern in the UK and in the US. And we've seen it around the world with great exceptions, such as Finland and New Zealand, I would say.
Mm. Thanks, Bill. Yes, that there's a debate now ongoing, isn't there, that this may be the end of Trump, but it's not the end of Trumpism. So absolutely, those kinds of politics have to be addressed. And all the insecurity that people are facing, you know, particularly economic insecurity, is one of the things that the far right is really able to ramp up and put their poisonous narrative out there. So you touched on the TPNW there, and of course, Ireland, I believe, is one of the ratifying states. So that is a great step. So the next question comes from Phoebe Spence, and Phoebe says, will the TPNW have any influence on the government? This is the big question for us, of course. So will it make a difference? Who would like to start off on that one? Phil? Unmute.
Although they saying it's irrelevant and all the rest of it, I think it will have an effect, because any big financial institution that's investing in companies will not want to invest in weapons that are deemed controversial. The TPNW makes nuclear weapons uncontrovertibly controversial. Up to now, they're not deemed to be controversial. I know that sounds like madness, but that is the legal situation as I understand it. So disinvestment will affect them, and there will be some pressure, but I fear that UK exceptionalism will reign. That's my fear. And we've had such a long history really promoting militarism as a solution when it isn't, that I don't see us getting out of that quickly. I can't see a route out of that, but I could be mistaken. So that's my response to that.
Thanks very much, Phil. Richard?
Well, the trouble is, I think that what can influence the British government in the future, a Labour government or even a Conservative government, the pressure of public opinion. We've seen it here and there. We've seen it in climate up to a point anyway. But so, I mean, I take Phil's point, and I like his points and his being, and as I said in my chat just now, I think maybe I was too pessimistic. I think that the disinvestment point, the growing pressure, public opinion, I think that the undergrowth of frustration amongst the British population, public opinion generally, is underestimated. There's a kind of under the unsaid kind of resentment building up, I think, which may even become sort of more onto the, if you like, the moral plane. I mean, I was surprised that the bishops, for example, finally, and the Church of England finally disinvesting at last, and arms control, for example. So there may be a build-up which was unseen at the moment, but will be fairly gradual. And so I take Phil's points, and I hope he's right.
Thanks, Diana, and then the next question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think largely it's going to be down to campaigners and spreading the word. But I think it's helpful to think in terms of what are the existential threats to humanity. And we ran a school sixth form conference under the title Two Routes to Extinction, Climate Change and Nuclear Weapons. And most of the sixth formers hadn't heard or thought really about nuclear weapons at all. And having them presented side by side with climate crisis, which they were absolutely on board with, I think made a really important link, because there really are two routes to extinction. And they're both things that can damage humanity and are crazy and nothing to do with the solution. So I think we've got to be clever with our messaging and bring back nuclear weapons into the center where it's been in other decades.
Thanks very much, Diana. Our next question is from Jean Evans. And there's been a few comments in the chat actually around the question of what local authorities can do, the Mayors for Peace movement. So her question is touching on the current drive to get local authorities to sign up in support of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Countries, cities, she gives examples like Washington, DC, Berlin, Manchester, Paris, Edinburgh, and so on. Can this tier of local democracy make a difference, either in terms of raising awareness or making governments rethink, or is it a symbolic gesture only? Who would like to respond on that? This is, I'm very interested in the answer actually, because C&D has been pushing or encouraging our groups and supporters to take this forward, and we've had some success in different areas. So does anyone have a comment on the significance of this, or whether it's worth doing? Diana, and then Phil.
I think it's a great idea, and we locally have been, for the last year or so, been working really hard to build up connections with the local authority, inviting people from the local authority to our workshops. And we had our MP and two new councillors along to the last one. And they really are wanting to be engaged. I think they're a key part of our non-functional democracy, or should be. And I think that taking a motion which is related to nuclear weapons and perhaps ties in with some other thing that they're already into would be quite possible. One of our councillor friends has tipped us off that bringing a motion to the whole council is a good way of working. And if you get it through, which of course you may not, but that then has to be shared with all other local authorities in the local authority association. So I think it's a good route.
Thanks, Diana. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, I'm backing Diana for Prime Minister personally. So I take it that's the start of your campaign. But no, really, I could do with somebody else. No, sorry, but I do think cities like Manchester, Edinburgh, Paris, New York, I think when you get, and they're big cities, and at the local level, you can, and you often do get totally different discussions than what you get in Parliament, because you've got this horrible, I don't know, a lot of MPs go crazy when they're in Parliament. They go so macho, it's unbelievable. Obviously, there's very honourable exceptions to that. I mean, Caroline Lucas is a very good exception, and I can think of lots of other people, but they're a minority. But at the local level, and it's also true that the majority of people don't support Trident. They do see it. They don't think it defends us. I think they understand it's a sort of status symbol. And a lot of younger people, and I found this on Extinction Rebellion events, they sort of, when you said, oh, did you know there's several thousand nuclear weapons, or we've got 200 nuclear weapons in the UK, they look at you as though you've just landed from a sort of flying saucer or something, because they haven't really they've forgotten about it, and nobody's mentioning about it. So when people talk about our deterrent, they don't think of a weapon that can destroy civilization. People have no concept of the incredible destructive power of these damn things. They are, and if you think Hiroshima was bad, we're talking about something multiple times that. Something, you know, just one of our submarines can destroy 40 cities. I mean, all around the world. That is insane beyond belief. So I think at the local level, it's quite a good way forward, because it gets you away from that horrible Westminster bubble and group think. And I think Scotland must be a massive opportunity now, and maybe Wales too.
Thanks very much, Richard, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Very, very quickly, I was going to Phil. I agree with Phil completely, and Diana for Prime Minister certainly. But no, seriously, local. There must be less deference in British public opinion. Is the deference is a built-up frustration about these kind of things? As Phil says, people don't know, not only the question of what does deterrence mean, but also the cost of this useless thing, the cost of it. And people, and so the trouble is, MPs, Westminster MPs, don't have the courage, even if they have the private skepticism or hostility towards these things, don't have the courage because of the reasons we know, and their party leaders won't allow them to. So the grassroots question is very important. Scotland is important, and Wales, as Phil mentioned, and Ireland too. And I hope with the encourage that, well, not the disaster of the devolution that Boris Johnson says, but actually more and more mayors are there, more local democracy, and I hope there's room for optimism in all this area, and it's a very important area to pursue.
Thanks very much, Richard. It's another question which relates to this somewhat, but I'm going to put it because it comes at it from a different angle. It's about how we can impact upon the parliamentary process, and I particularly want to hear your views, because obviously C&D encourages a lot of parliamentary lobbying, and sometimes you can think, well, do they listen? You know, even if they do, what are they going to do about it? The question is from Bradley King. He says, when both main parties back increased defence spending, what is the way forward through the parliamentary process? I mean, good question, I would say. Who would like to have a quick stab at that? We're a bit running out of time, but any quick response, Richard?
Well, very quickly, I mean, it's a distinction between, you can have some defence spending or spending to defend British national security, Britain's real security. That's called defence. Now we call it defence of British health. That's called defence. So it's a meaning question, really. It's what do we mean by national security, and indeed what we mean by defence. We want to spend money. I mean, some of the best things that the armed forces are doing and practical ways are actually helping to distribute things. They've been really gone foot and mouth. So these civil contingencies, they're actually quite good. So it's the question of what we are spending on. You can't obliterate, I don't think, defence, and people won't want to, and you will never get a majority for that. It's a question of what you mean by defence of Britain's national security. And obviously the pandemic now is the heart of British national security, and which as I said before, official national government risk registers said it was. So it's the question of saying this is the uselessness and expense and dangers of nuclear weapons part of a defence policy, but not everything else. I mean, we should have cybersecurity, for example, to stop people invading our national infrastructure when it comes to cyber attacks. So that is the best kind of, or better kind of defence.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else want to have a go? Phil?
Well, I think there's some mileage with some select committees. That's what I would say, because particularly if you can talk about taking a sort of security agenda and talk about the need for real defence or real security, rather than talk about what passes for defence, which means more military spending. So I think giving evidence to some of these select committees is some way forward. But I agree, it's very depressing when you have both Labour and Conservative saying it's a great idea to spend all this money. and then not really commenting about the lack of spending on climate change, which is such staring us in the face.
Thanks, Phil. Diana?
I agree with what Phil's just said, but I also, I think kind of public action. And I think that the Alternative Security Review will be trying to gather up different voices. But I also think that the idea of a people's parliament outside parliament would be quite good. And if it can't happen in the flesh, it could happen online as a process. And I nominate CND to run it. Because I actually just think a very big and visible, known about conversation that's really putting the questions out there and listening to people.
Okay, sounds good. As long as I can sit on the wool sack, that would be great. Okay, so we've got just under 10 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a few of the final questions that I can see to you, and then give you each like 3 or 4 minutes to respond to any elements of those that you want to. You don't have to, but I just want to, air those questions, and then any concluding remarks you may wish to make. So first of all, the deterrent word has been used a few times. Andrew Fleming has said, if it is the ultimate deterrent, a deterrent to what? If it was ever used, the retaliation would annihilate this country. I think Richard touched on that earlier. So that's one you can touch on if you want. Mark Sayers is asking when there'll be a coordinated campaign to get rid of American command and control bases like Menwith Hill and Fylingdales. Well, there is quite a bit of work on that, particularly from Yorkshire CND, but maybe it's the time to step that up. And then we have, how are you going to reach and engage young people behind a simple, hardly new idea of redirecting military spending to things that will defend them against the threats they face in the future? So how do you engage young people? And then the final one I'm putting to you is, where on earth is the arms bill money coming from, with the UK already facing significant debt in billions? So a very good question there. So speakers, feel free to touch on any of those you want to, but also please take the opportunity to make your closing remarks. So Richard, I'll come to you first. 2 or 3 minutes there, please.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. One question hasn't been brought up is trade unions. Trade unions say, if we get rid of Trident and so on, all this skilled workforce, what will happen to all our skilled workers there? And of course, they could be diverted. I was going to say to civil nuclear power stations, which is not. No. Say to the green economy and so on. So it's not going to be very difficult diverting that. But that's the question of labour and trade union opposition to disarmament. And the other thing was the credibility of deterrence. I mean, you can argue about the notion of or at least the use of the word deterrence, but how credible is it really when you come to think of it? And the other thing is arms sales, and how can a country which suggests that it is or claims to promote human rights around the world can at the same time be the world's second biggest arms salesman? Is completely inconsistent, incompatible. And lastly, let's go back to the question of national security. What is our real national security? And we've all touched on that, but it means, as we now know, because of the pandemic, it means defending ourselves from pandemics. It means a much more less poverty, much more sane economy, and all those kind of things. I.e., not on spending on arms, and certainly not on nuclear arms.
Thanks very much indeed, Richard. Phil?
Well, deterrence of what? Nobody can answer that question, because it isn't deterring anybody conceivably. And in fact, if you just look at military spending just as a whole, NATO outspends Russia, if that was, you think, who your enemy is, multiple times over. So if you really want to have sensible levels of military spending, we should cut it by about 50%. And America outspends the rest of the world numerous times over. In terms of money, I think it's more about how we best use our human resources actually than anything else, because we can actually spend money on all sorts of things as long as there's people to do the work and we can still buy the stuff. We can basically print money. We've just created another 150 billion to deal with this pandemic. We should be spending that on tackling climate change, on making sure young people who can actually afford houses to live in, dealing with poverty. That's real security. So it's really where you direct your resources. And the trouble is, if you focus on this weapon of mass destruction, it's a waste of precious resources.
Thanks very much, Phil. Diana, over to you.
Yes, the money will be coming from real security for people. So that's the pity of it, and it has to be made known. National security, how do we get it? I think we should try a lot harder of building relationships rather than ramping up the antagonism, and learning to cooperate on the things that will be essential to every country. And I just hope that the size of the external to all of us threats now are going to make us think differently. As far as nuclear weapons go, they certainly don't protect us. They make us a nuclear target, which we might not otherwise be, even if there were people trying to attack us. And I think I'd just like to say something about engaging with young people. And I do think it's crucially important. And, at risk of seeming to just promote my own thing all the time, I really hope that this can be a major part of the alternative security review. And there are plans for doing a national survey of young people that I'm planning to make links with the school up the road and see if I can do some interviews with sixth formers and have just serious conversations. I think that'll do for me. Thank you.
Pardon?
And that's enough from me.
Okay, I was waiting with bated breath. Okay, well, thanks very much to our three speakers. That was really fantastic. And thanks to everyone who's joined us today. Earlier on in the chat, I put the link to the new Security Not Trident briefing. But if you missed that, you can always go on the CND website. Please don't forget, if you're not already a member of CND, please do consider joining. And my colleague Sarah behind the scenes is about to share our online shop as well, once you've seen that briefing. Normally at events, obviously, we have lots of interesting merchandise and all our briefings and so on available, but we can't do that anymore, or at least not for now. But we are selling online. So particularly with Christmas coming up, can I point out our lovely new range of things like tea towels as well as badges. So here we have some stuff coming up. So if you can spare a moment or two to watch, please do so. But again, thanks everyone very much indeed. And big thank you to our speakers, and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I don't know if you can hear me, Diana, but I made a comment. I meant to mention citizens' assemblies as a good way forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that would link in with your excellent idea. We've got to create some alternatives to the non-democratic Westminster situation.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're quite hard to organise, I understand.
Well, none of this is easy, but it needs to be done, and maybe we need to get some crowdfunding to do it.
And or maybe get a university to run it for us.
Yeah. So Richard, you're still there by the sound of it.
I am here.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes, I can now. The screen views change. So
It is, yeah, it's on the right there. No, I just think, and Diana's point about the young as well, I think, not too optimistic to say, there's kind of unsort of said frustration beneath the surface.
Yeah.
I found that with various things. I mean, I wrote things at theatre about the colour of justice, about, racism and all that kind of stuff. And that people would not come to this, this kind of stuff. It's too boring, it's too wordy, it's too worthy and wordy. But actually they didn't. Young people came and they were stimulated by all this. Things strike chords, and if there's a frustration and under that, I mean, my maybe we're not typical, but I think not only grandchildren, teenagers, late teenagers, but, and their friends. And as soon as you talk to them, briefly, they said, yes, of course. But it's not a question of, and they say it's obvious, and this will go away. So we're going to go do gaming because we agree nuclear weapons are absurd and X, Y, and Z is absurd. Yeah. But they haven't got the comment, they can't organize. They actually, even the young, I'm afraid, too many of the young are already cynical. Yeah. So Diana, that's one of the sort of
rightly cynical, because they're just disillusioned with the process, because it clearly doesn't work, does it?
And I think that's a challenge for us, to be honest. I just don't. I refuse to be cynical, because then you become part of what you're afraid of. I mean, and trying to forecast what will happen. I just keep thinking, well, it depends what we all do, what will happen. So don't stop, don't rest, just keep going. But maybe that's just like being drunk or something. I don't know.
I should go now, but have I got your email? You're both Phil and Diana's emails, I suppose, haven't I? I must have done.
Yeah, I think you'd have it on one of the mailings from, is it Sarah or Sarah?
Sarah, exactly. Yeah, okay, that's right. It's on. Well done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's very good to talk.
Yes, thanks.
Anyway, let's keep in touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And good luck, Diana, with your great enterprise. And Phil, very good to talk.
And yeah, nice to speak.
Yeah.
And Janet King suggested the Citizens UK are good at coordinating these sort of citizen assembly things. So need to look them up.
And that's a good point. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, I shall.
Thank you, everyone.
Say cheerio. Good to talk to you all.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye bye. Oh, hello and bye bye.